fans, welcome to the Football Game Plan NFL All-32 show. David Hassagen here, and this week joined by Football Game Plan correspondent Troy Anthony. We'll be joined later by Alex Marinoni. Emory Hunt is on location this week, scouting at the College Gridiron Showcase. Now, he said he's there scouting, but I just don't know, Troy. I think he might be down there for the weather. What do you think?
I think he might be down there trying to get a little bit of a tan.
I think he might be. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But don't forget to follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. He's got some great stuff from some lesser-known NFL prospects down there in Florida. It was an exciting wild card round full of upsets, and we will cover that in the second half in just a bit. But first, let's go into the 4-minute offense.
Hey guys, Jennifer Mariweka here with your 4-minute offense. As we get into the divisional round of playoffs, let's review what colors some of our familiar faces will be wearing and who isn't coming back at all. It looks like legendary coach Mike McCarthy will be sporting that royal blue with a true silver lining now that he is officially signed on as the Cowboys head coach. This marks the fastest recruiting and hiring done in the NFL. The former Green Bay coach brings 26 years of experience with him over to Dallas, and fans are looking forward to seeing the relationship between McCarthy and quarterback Dak Prescott. But what we are really going to be looking at are the team and relationships that McCarthy will be inheriting. What kind of relationship will McCarthy have with offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, if he's kept? As of now, reports say that McCarthy will be keeping Moore on his staff. Now that Wade Phillips is no longer defensive coordinator in LA, the Rams will be looking to recruit for a new defensive coordinator. Phillips was the DC for the Super Bowl winning Broncos, who also took the Rams to the Super Bowl and kept the Patriots to 1 touchdown in Super Bowl 53. We are entering the divisional round of the NFL playoffs this weekend, so let's look at the 4 games coming up. The number 1 seeds square off against their opponents on Saturday, and the number 2 seeds will play on Sunday. There were a few upsets last weekend, but 3 of the 4 games should be much more predictable. First, we have the Vikings at the 49ers. The Vikings came up big last weekend, but do they have it in them again against one of the best offenses in the game? Nothing short of perfection from the entire team will do. Next, we have the Titans at Ravens. Again, we have a pretty good team against a dominant team. The Ravens arguably have the best offense in the league, so the Titans need their defense to really step it up to be competitive. And then on Sunday, we have the Texans at Chiefs. The Texans barely escaped with a win last weekend, and the Chiefs are looking to get in the AFC Championship for the 2nd straight year. The Chiefs' offense should be enough against the Texans' defense to win the game, so Deshaun Watson will need to play his best game and come up big. Last but certainly not least, we have the Seahawks at Packers. The last time these 2 teams in the playoffs was in 2015 when Seattle grabbed the onside kick and eventually won in overtime to advance to the Super Bowl. This game should be pretty close and may come down to the last minute. That's it for me today. I'm Jennifer Mariweka, and I'll be seeing you around next week.
Now, before we get into the divisional round, Troy, let's talk a little buy or sell, because this wild card round was a little bit crazy. And let's start with the Buffalo Bills defense. They kind of collapsed in the second half. Do you think they were overhyped? Buy or selling that point?
I'm going to sell that point. I don't think they were overhyped. They were one of the more consistent defenses all season. And yes, it's a shame that they collapsed in the second half, but the first half was extremely strong from them. And I'm not just going to throw it all out the window, throw it all off the table because they just happened to have a bad half. Granted, that was the second half of the wild card round, which ultimately cost them the game. But they were one of the most consistent defenses all year. So I have to sell that.
And it was certainly the Texans who adjusted to that game plan as well. Deshaun Watson had a heck of a day in the second half. Second point we're going to talk about here, there was a lot of questionable decision-making, especially in the NFC. Sean Payton and Doug Peterson kind of seemed like they tossed their games away, their game plans away, but buy or sell that they are the number 1 reasons to blame for both of their teams' exits.
Number 1 reason, that's kind of strong because, as we all know, football is a team game. Each and every play counts. Not one play is going to cost you the game. On Peyton's behalf, the clock management really hurt, especially towards the end of the game. But I can't put that solely on him, so I have to sell that. Breeze didn't have a very good game. He had 2 turnovers in the game. The one before half really cost them. They could have gone into the half up points, but instead they go into the half down points. In regards to Peterson, I'm going to have to sell that as well. he lost his starting quarterback. I mean, McCown came in, did a decent job for him, but the 2 4-and-outs that they ended up having, I understand having to go for it with your backup quarterback. You think this is the only way that we're going to be able to get the job done. So still, I don't put that on Peterson as well. I have to sell that.
Selling both of them. Interesting. Now, the big news that we've got coming up this week, obviously, is the Dallas Cowboys have their new man. Mike McCarthy, the former Green Bay Packers head coach, has been signed up as the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys under Jerry Jones. Now, the question is, though, is McCarthy the right guy for the job? Mike McCarthy is the best coach available. Buy or sell?
This is a tough one for me because the Dallas Cowboys offense wasn't where their woes came from. It was the defense. I would have liked Dallas to get a strong defensive-minded head coach, but then again, there were really no strong defensive-minded head coach out there for candidates. So with McCarthy being arguably the best candidate out there, I like that. I like the decision. I'm going to have to buy that this was probably the best decision for them. My question is, who is he going to get as his DC? Because like I said, that's probably going to be the most important acquisition for them this offseason.
And that's going to be something to watch to see what the timing is on that, whether they do that before the draft happens or whether they get their personnel together and then they make that decision. We'll keep an eye on that. When we return, we will break down 2 intriguing matchups in the NFC Divisional Round when we come back on the NFL All-32 show.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Ninth and Lux. Visit the website ninethandlux.com and check out the clothing gallery. Do You Music with featured artist IW and his latest album, Season 2. You can check that out on iTunes as well as doyoumusic.com. Nesby Phipps, art, life, entertainment. NesbyPhipps.com. Grind It Out Fitness. Visit the website grinditoutfitness.com and download the app.
Welcome back to the NFL All-32 show. Injuries finally caught up to the Eagles in the wild card round while the Vikings completely shut down the Saints in the Superdome. Now the question is, will the upsets continue? Our first matchup features the number 1 seed San Francisco 49ers taking on those Minnesota Vikings. The biggest question is, can the Vikings do to San Fran what they did to New Orleans? What do you think that the Vikings need to do to win this ballgame?
2 things. One, they have to shut down the San Francisco 49ers run. That offense goes as the running game goes. I don't think Jimmy G has done enough to prove to me that he can get the job done solely by himself. He had 2 phenomenal games in my mind, and both of them came against the Arizona Cardinals. So if the Vikings can shut down the run, they set themselves up nicely. Number 2, Kirk Cousins is going to have to come to play in this one because we know how dominant that San Francisco 49ers defense can be. And if the Niners end up shutting down Dalvin Cook in the run, Cousins is going to have to do it solely with his arm. And he has the weapons to do it in Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Kyle Rudolph. It's going to be on Cousins.
And for San Francisco, obviously the defense is the big story. What do they have to do on offense?
On offense, once again, Jimmy G has to show up in this one because the Vikings are going to look to key to shut down Mostert and Tevin Coleman and Breda. So if Jimmy G can show up with that arm, we know ever since that Emmanuel Sanders showed up in San Francisco, the offense has looked better through the passing game. So if Jimmy G comes to play, it's going to go far for San Fran.
Now, in terms of the X factors for this game, obviously we can talk all day long about the San Francisco defense and Minnesota with their offense coming to play. Who are the X factors do you think for both teams?
X factor for San Francisco is going to be that defensive line because if Bosa and company can get to Kirk Cousins and make it harder for him to get that throw off, that's going to go far. We know how pertinent and important that Minnesota running game is with Dalvin Cook. He can kill you. He had 94 yards this past weekend and 2 touchdowns against the Saints. But this Niners defense is a little bit better than the Saints, I would say. As far as the Vikings go, once again, I'm going to have to say Kirk Cousins because we know how dynamic Dalvin Cook can be. But this Vikings offense goes through Kirk Cousins. If the Niners end up shutting him down, this is going to be a long game for the Vikings.
What do you think is the best bet? You guys obviously have been killing it on best bets, you and Alex. So if you're going to take best bets, try to make the viewers at home a little bit of money, what are you taking in this ballgame?
For this game, I have to go with the Minnesota Vikings plus 6.5. 6.5 is a lot of points. And the Minnesota Vikings, yes, they had a dud a couple weeks back against the Bears, but they showed out against this New Orleans Saints team this past week. This is postseason. You have to come to play. I really like the Vikings plus the 6.5 in this one.
Now the real question is, who do you like to win this ballgame?
This is a tough one for me.
This is an intriguing one.
Very tough and intriguing one. I'm going to have to go with the Vikings in this. I think that they have a hot hand, and if Dalvin Cook can keep rolling, Kirk Cousins gets Stephon Diggs involved earlier. I really liked this past week how they threw Danielle Hunter into the middle, sort of how the Giants had the NASCAR package. That's kind of how they got to Breeze and had a lot of pressure on Breeze. So if they do that again with Danielle Hunter in the middle, Everson Griffin on the outside, the defense became a little bit more dynamic. I think that they can get a lot of pressure on Jimmy G.
Interesting, an upset to start with. Let's get to the other NFC matchup, and it's going to be at the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. The Packers taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Green Bay has had a week to rest, but many have said that there are a lot of holes for both of these teams. Both Seattle and Green Bay have kind of looked susceptible on both sides of the ball. So what are the keys for Green Bay now that they have had a week to prepare? They know they've got Seattle. How do they take this game home?
This is going to be, I think that this is one of the more interesting games this week because both of these offenses can kill you through the ground or their quarterbacks can kill you through the air. Both of the quarterbacks are very dynamic, athletic, and can get yards with their legs. But the running game for Green Bay is going to be what I'm looking at here because we know that Rodgers can kill you with his arm. But what Aaron Jones is going to show up, with Jamal Williams is going to show up, that's going to be what makes the difference in this matchup for Green Bay.
What about for Seattle? Because obviously they took advantage of a Philadelphia team that was well below full strength on offense. The defense has been solid all year, and Russell Wilson has shown that he is still very much clutch. What does Seattle have to do to get past Green Bay?
Seattle's running game is really hurting right now after losing Carson and Penny. That's 1,600 yards off of the table for them. Yes, they signed Marshawn Lynch. We know who Marshawn Lynch is. He's a legend. You can't stop him from 1 yard out. He's going to get that 1 yard carry. But what else can they do on the ground? Russell Wilson is going to have to do a lot more with his legs to complement his passing game. He had 370 total yards this past week against the Eagles. We know he can throw the ball. He has dynamic receivers, but the running game as well for the Seattle Seahawks is going to be what's the difference in this one.
Now, in terms of X factors, obviously a lot of the hype was around Marshawn Lynch coming back to Seattle and maybe making that impact. Really hasn't shown it so far. So what other X factors are you looking for these two teams?
Russell Wilson, at the end of the day. Here's a guy who, no matter how his season goes, they can start off the season poor. Russell Wilson always turns it up towards the end of the season and into postseason. He is the sole factor that is going to drive the Seattle Seahawks team, whether it be with his arm, whether it be through his legs. He's one of the most game-changing players in the NFL right now. He is the X factor for all the Seattle Seahawks team.
And what about for Green Bay? Obviously, a lot of the pressure will be on Aaron Rodgers. He's kind of the last of the old guard that's left in these playoffs. No Roethlisberger, no Brady, no more Breeze. But is he the real X factor for this team, or is it somebody else that we should keep an eye on?
I think it's a unit. Yes, we know who Rodgers is. We know what he does in the postseason. But the whole defensive unit is going to be their X factor and how they stop Russell Wilson with his legs or through the air. Because with receivers that can take the top off, like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, there's a lot of speed coming from those outsides. How is this defensive unit going to be able to stop Russell Wilson?
And Metcalf became a big target for Seattle last game, so we'll see how Green Bay handles him. What do you have for a best bet for this game to make the folks at home a little money?
In this game, I like Seattle plus the 4 points. I think this game is going to come down to the end with both of these quarterbacks being as dynamic as they are. It's probably going to come down to a field goal, so I'm going to take Seattle plus the 4.
And you mentioned it, a quarterback duel, two all-time clutch performers in the fourth quarter. Who wins this ball game and why?
Again, another hard one. I'm going to have to go with the Seattle Seahawks. I trust Russell Wilson more. I think that he's the type of player who at any given moment can change the game, whether it be with his legs or through the air or just motivating his team. Now, I'm not saying that Rodgers can't do that as well. I think that Russell Wilson has a little bit more of an X factor in him to change the game.
So you heard it here first, folks. 2 upsets predicted by Troy Anthony in the NFC. Stay with us here on the Game Plus Network because when we come back after this short break, Alex Marinoni will join me to break down the AFC divisional games right here on the Game Plus Network. Stay with us.
Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Financial Coaching LLC, Investment, Retirement, Security, Stewardship Credit. Financial growth is in your hands. StewardshipCredit.com. Adrienne Marie Photo, photographer, writer, management. AdrienneMariePhotography.com. Lock Multimedia.
Welcome back, fans. David Hashagen now joined by Alex Marinoni as we now look at the AFC divisional round. It's weird to talk about the second round without the New England Patriots, but thanks to the Tennessee Titans, that is the case that Tennessee now faces a much greater challenge in the Baltimore Ravens. The real question is, what do the Titans have to do to have a chance in this ball game?
Well, they're going to have to control the ball. I mean, we all saw how the Baltimore offense was this year. I mean, it was electric. Every possession, it seems like they were getting down the field, they were scoring points, they were controlling the clock as well. If you're Tennessee, you need to control it. You got to give it right back to them. You're the number 2 or number 3 rushing offense in football this year. You have the leading rusher, and you have a guy in Tannehill who's pretty athletic. You need to utilize a guy like Ryan Tannehill possibly in this game. Do whatever you need to do to win the time of possession will be the key factor.
And what about for Baltimore? Obviously, they've got all the dynamic pieces in place, but their defense has shown a few holes. Is that the key for them to try to slow down Henry, you think?
It is one of the keys. You definitely want to slow down Henry because of what he's been able to do, and we saw what he did to New England. I mean, he single-handedly was the offense for Tennessee and knocked them out of the playoffs. But my biggest factor here for Baltimore is no mistakes. You are talented enough on both sides of the ball to win this game. Do not give Tennessee any more possessions. Don't give them any more reason to come back and win in these games. Just control the ball and don't turn the ball over, and they should be fine.
Now, obviously, Baltimore's got the human X factor that is Lamar Jackson, but is there anyone else on this team that you're looking for to be an X factor for the Ravens to get into the championship game?
Absolutely. I'm looking at a guy like Mark Andrews. He's been on the scene all year. He's been probably their number 1 target as at the tight end position. He needs to be a guy who steps up now. He's looked at as that number 2 tier type tight end right now. He's behind the Kittles and Kelce's of the world. This is his time and his moment to become that level, to be Lamar Jackson's go-to guy in a clutch situation.
And what about for Tennessee? Anybody you're looking for there that might make the difference?
I mean, this is probably an obvious one, but to me, this game's on Ryan Tannehill. I don't believe in a game like this with what Baltimore has done offensively this year is you can just throw for 72 yards and win this game. You're going to have to throw the ball. You're going to have to move the ball a little bit downfield. And more importantly, you're going to have to convert third downs and some fourth downs with your arm. This game, Derrick Henry, I feel like, will get his, especially against this Baltimore defense that has been susceptible to the run a little bit. But if Tannehill can move the ball a little bit down the field, even with his legs, he's just going to have to make more plays and be more of a factor in this game than he was last week.
Now, obviously, as I said, with Troy, you both have been doing the best bet segment. So what do you have for this ball game between these two squads? What do you got for a line?
I actually have 2. There's 2 that I really like. The line right now is at +9 for Tennessee. I like Tennessee to cover this. You're talking about 2 teams that run the ball, they control the time of possession. This is 2 teams that they in their own right mind control the clock. So their score is going to be probably a little lower than we're used to seeing from a Baltimore type of game. This is a game that I think at +9, you could definitely see it going down to 1 score. And the over-under, I really like the over at 47.5. I think both of these teams will move the ball down the field, and they will score points in this game. And we've seen what Baltimore has done all year. At 47.5, they may put up in the high 30s themselves. So if Tennessee's going to keep up with them, they're going to have to score those points, and they are capable of doing that, putting up 20 last game, and even some of it coming from the defensive side. You won't be surprised if special teams or defense has a part in this. So 47.5 is definitely achievable.
Now, who the question is, who's the winner in this ball game and why?
Ooh, that's it's closer than you would think, but I am going with Baltimore. I think all around they are just more talented. John Harbaugh is one of the best coaches in the NFL right now, and giving him a week off and a week to prepare. Mike Vrabel and his company have done a great job, and they've already went into New England and took down the beast. But doing it on back-to-back weeks with a well-rested, ready-to-go Baltimore Ravens team with what they put out this year, it's hard to imagine them going in there and beating them as hot as they are. I do like Baltimore to take it.
Let's go to the other matchup now. Meanwhile, in Houston, the Texans came up into the second round with a huge amount of momentum, mainly behind J.J. Watt and a huge comeback against the Buffalo Bills. But next is the number 2 seed Kansas City Chiefs and gunslinger Patrick Mahomes. What are the keys for Kansas City to take care of business at Arrowhead against a defense that's very confident?
Well, for KC, what you're going to need to do is defense, defense, defense. You are potentially going into a shootout with Deshaun Watson on the other side. You have to step up, specifically the defensive line. You have to get at Deshaun Watson. We saw in the first half with Buffalo when the D-line was winning without having to blitz Watson, they were able, I mean, that could go for anybody, but when you're able to win up front and you can get pressure on Deshaun Watson, it will slow them down. And with the way KC's offense is, you just need a couple of those early possessions to give your offense that leg up. So if you can get to Deshaun Watson early and keep them from staying off the board early on, you will have them playing catch up, and it'll be tough for Houston to come back.
And what about for the Texans? Obviously, their offense was stalled in the first half, came back nicely in the second half against Buffalo. What's the key for them to get past this Kansas City team? It was a much better defense than people expected.
Absolutely, especially down the stretch. And in this one, it's established the running game. You know Deshaun Watson can handle himself. You know Deshaun Watson's going to come up big in those moments. We saw it time and time again, most notably last week. You need to establish the running game. You need Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde to play a very pivotal role in this game, even if it's the short passing game. Just get the ball into their hands, establish the clock, establish time of possession, eat up some of that time, and yeah, establish the running game. Will do it here.
Who do you think is the X factor here? Because obviously we can talk about Deshaun Watson. He finally gets a playoff win. He came up clutch. You got a lot of big names, though, on the opposite side for Kansas City that you have to take care of. Who's the one X factor, though, do you think that will make the difference in this ballgame?
To me, I'm going to stick to the running game, and I think it's two. It's Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde. It's the tandem. Those two need to have a big role in this because you need to take the onus off of Deshaun Watson. It's one thing to have a tight game like it was in Buffalo and Deshaun Watson to make enough plays to win, but you're going to need more than Deshaun Watson in this game to keep up with this KC offense. This KC offense is electric, and it's shown the last few weeks, and you saw last year they were able to do it in the postseason. So they're not afraid of the big moment, and you know Andy Reid on a bye week, he's going to become very prepared. So if you are Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson, you need to play a pivotal role in this game.
What lines are you looking at for this ballgame? Because obviously this one's a little bit interesting, too, in terms of the over-under and the spread. I was kind of surprised by this one.
Yeah, a 9.5-point spread in favor of KC. I like Houston to cover this spread because Deshaun Watson, and one thing with this Texans offense is that they haven't blown a lot of teams out this year, but they keep games close no matter who their opponent is, whether it's a good team or bad team. If it's called for a shootout or a slobber knocker, or heads down type of game, they cover and they handle their business. I think this game is going to be it's going to be a shootout, and I think it comes down to one score. So the 9.5, I definitely like Houston covering. And when it comes down to my second bet, it's 50.5 right now is the over/under. If weather permits, I like the over. If it's clear skies, clear field, there's no reason why these two teams don't play a shootout. But of course, it's KC, so if it's tough conditions, look to possibly take that under.
Could be a blizzard, could be 70 degrees. We just don't know.
Absolutely.
Who wins this ballgame?
I definitely like I like KC. I think KC has too much, and again, Andy Reid on a bye. I just like that. I trust him with a better game plan than Bill O'Brien. I think it's going to be a slow start for Houston, like it was with Buffalo, but I think this offense is too electric, and they'll take over.
So you picked the favorites, and Troy went with the underdogs. It'll be interesting to see which one of you comes out on top, or neither of you, depending on what we saw from the wild card round, because that was a wild one to be sure. That'll do it, folks, for the NFL All-32 show. Don't forget, you can go to footballgameplan.com for all your football knowledge, and it's where football really makes sense. Go to SoundCloud or iTunes, where you can listen to the NFL All-32 podcast with myself, Troy Anthony, Alex Marinoni, and Emery Hunt, talking about all the buzz across the NFL as we prepare you for the divisional round. For Alex Marinoni and Troy Anthony, I'm David Hassagen saying have a great weekend, enjoy the divisional round, and thanks for watching.